Baroness James, may I ask you, what's your latest novel, Death in Holy Orders, about?
Well, it's a classical detective story, which is the kind I write. It features my detective poet, Adam Dalgleish, and it's set in a theological college in a very old Victorian mansion set on the edge of the sea in East Anglia. Yeah. And the victim is a rather unpleasant archdeacon who visits for the weekend in order to collect as much evidence as possible because he wants to close the place down. And for that and for other reasons he has a lot of enemies. So not surprisingly he comes to St Anselm's but he doesn't leave it alive.
What does interest you though in the theme of murder?
Well, I don't know that I'm interested specifically in murder, though I suppose I must be to an extent. I'm interested in death and I'm interested in the structure of the detective story, which is about really bringing order out of disorder. I mean, you could have a detective story that didn't feature murder, but murder is such a unique crime, such a contaminating and such an appalling crime, that if you have murder at the heart of a detective story, it sort of packs more punch than if you just have a detective story of who stole Aunt Allie's diamonds, for example. So usually with a detective story there is murder at the heart.
Baroness James, you've been writing since the 1950s. Has your process of writing changed during this time?
I don't think the process has changed very much. I've always preferred to write by hand. I do occasionally write, but it's on by typewriter, but it is an old-fashioned electric typewriter. I don't use a computer. But what I do, I dictate what I've written to my secretary when she comes in, so that I can hear what the dialogue sounds like, and I can hear the very distinctive rhythm of prose, and then she puts it on the computer, and of course I can see the huge advantage of that. Every time I want to make a correction, it's only a matter of minutes.
Real-life crimes are a real focal point in the media. Newspapers have gained significant mileage over events such as Bulger, Dando, West and Nilsson. Have you been inspired in your novels by any real-life events like this?
There's only been one of my books which has been inspired by a real-life murder, and mostly I find I'm interested in them, who isn't? But I don't know that they're very helpful to me as a crime novelist, because until these murders are solved we know so little about them. We only know what the newspapers can print, which is what the police decide that they can print. So even if one is trying to solve them, there isn't enough information there. And where the psychopathic murders are concerned, they are particularly horrible and disgusting and terrifying, of course, but they're not very suitable for the detective story, which does suppose that we have a sane and fairly intelligent murderer, because otherwise who is Adam Dalgleish and the reader pitting their wits against? You can't pit your wits against a man who murders just because he feels like murdering that day, or who's a sexual psychopath, really.
Crime writing is perceived rather differently here than on the other side of the Atlantic. Do you think this has something to do with historical tradition of crime writing in this country? If you look at the writing of Conan Doyle, to Dennis Wheatley, yourself, up to the present day with Ian Rankin, there seems to be this great tradition of crime writing. That history doesn't seem to exist on the other side of the Atlantic. Do you think that's why it's taken more seriously here than there?
I think it's very interesting to consider differences between our crime writing in the States, and I would agree with you that it is taken more seriously here. I think in the States when I'm there, I'm amazed by the number of detective stories written, what they call mysteries. You can go into a bookshop and there are literally hundreds of them by people one's never heard, and I think many of them are not particularly good. Whereas here I think there are some writers of high caliber working in the field of crime fiction, of detection, and of course of spy fiction too. One thinks of John le Carré, and of course with detection one thinks of Ian Rankin in Edinburgh, and those books I think are of a very different quality, and they are taken more seriously.
I believe you enjoy the Prime Suspect series. Is there any other television or writing of the late 20th or early 21st century that you find inspiring?
I enjoy all crime if it is well done. I don't know that I'm particularly influenced by it, but I do enjoy it, and of course it has changed considerably. One used to see Z cars, for example, which were it was very innovative at the time. It changed the way in which we saw crime portrayed on the screen, and it's changing all the time, and it's become much more realistic. And yes, I do enjoy it. I particularly enjoyed Prime Suspect. I thought it was extremely good.
Baroness James, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.